All right. I have that as 11:30, so I'll go ahead and welcome you all. My name is Jacob Turner. I'm with the Arkansas Conference of the United Methodist Church. Again, welcome to today's webinar. I wanted to address a few things before we get started. Number one, this is a Zoom webinar and not a Zoom meeting, so you can see the panelists here, but we cannot see you and you cannot see each other. You just can see the panelists. So with that in mind, if you have questions for the panelists with John Grisham at any time, please use the Q&A function. You will see that button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. It says Q&A. It's got little chat bubbles intersecting each other. Please put your questions there. We have over 750 people registered for this event, so we may not be able to address all of your questions, but of course they will be attempting to address as many as possible. With that, I'll turn it over to the Reverend Wayne Clark, President and CEO of the Methodist Foundation for Arkansas. Wayne, over to you.
Thank you, Jacob, and thank all of you for joining us for this really exciting hour with John Grisham. As Jacob said, I'm president of the Methodist Foundation for Arkansas. We are one of the largest United Methodist foundations in the country. We started in 1963. Last year, we returned over $4 million back to local churches and Methodist-related institutions in Arkansas for them to do ministry. And in addition to that $4 million, we gave out over $1.6 million in grants, especially with COVID. We were giving a lot more in that. But the foundation is here to help local churches, individuals, and our Methodist institutions. We started because of the pandemic back in October, this event called In Conversation Together as a way of trying to connect people since we couldn't be together. So we've started this monthly event, and it has just continued to be a great way for us to be contacted with you and with each other in contact with. I do want to thank Jacob Turner, Amy Azell, who's from the annual conference of the United Methodist Church in Arkansas, Janet Marshall for securing our speaker today, which you'll hear more about him and from him in just a minute, and Haley Klein for all of her prep work. And especially, again, I want to give my thanks to each of you. John, we are so grateful and so honored to have you with us, and we especially are grateful that you were accommodating with your schedule to make up for our snow day from last week. Folks know about you, but I do want to just remind them that you were born in Jonesboro, Arkansas. You live family farm near Black Oak. Your mother was from Monette and your dad from Lake City. So you definitely have the Arkansas roots. You fled from the farm when you were 7 to the big city of Parkin, we understand. Spent 3 years there. Then y'all moved to Mississippi, where you finished high school and law school. And very much like one of your first characters, you were a small town broke lawyer, you tell us.
Yes.
And but had this desire to write a novel, and you told us that you worked on The Time to Kill, and it did not do what you wanted to in terms of your retirement benefits. You told your wife, "Give me one more shot," and the firm was that next one. And as you said, I love this statement, you stopped suing people after the firm came out. So we are grateful for you. So let me just ask you to talk about your Arkansas days and your growing up here and those connections.
Well, thank you, Wayne. First of all, I'm happy to be here, delighted to be here. And I feel like I'm among home folks when I'm in Arkansas. My parents retired to Mountain View, Arkansas, probably 30 years ago. And I spent a lot of time in Mountain View on the river fishing with my dad. Dad passed away 6 years ago. Mom passed away 6 years ago. Dad was 4 years ago. They both had long, happy, healthy lives with lots of kids and grandkids, and they both died at home in Mountain View, surrounded by their families. So they're not a bad life, not a bad way to go. They're both buried in Mountain View. So a lot of deep roots there. Most of my family is buried in the cemetery in Monette, Gregg Funeral Home. has buried a lot of my kinfolks over the last 40 years. We left the farm in early 1962. I was in the first grade, sort of in the middle of the night. My father had tried farming for a number of years and simply could not survive. It was a bad piece of land and bad weather and bad luck. And we would actually get the cotton crop in November, and it was never big enough, or the prices dipped or whatever. And we would load up in the old car. There were 3 kids back then, almost 4, and drive to Flint, Michigan, where my father would work a double shift every day, putting windshields into brand new Buicks. And that was our wintertime. I was in Flint. I don't remember those days. Thank goodness. My older sister does. And Dad would save his money and send the money back to pay off his bills and come back in the springtime and do it all again. So it was not a very good life. Although we didn't know that as kids. And my parents were really good about shielding us from the bad stuff. And it wasn't all bad. And all 4 grandparents lived within 10 miles, and aunts and uncles everywhere. And, it was what everybody else was doing. We moved, finally, when Dad had enough, he walked down to the edge of the river that always flooded every year. And there was a dredging crew coming along the river, the Cuckleboro Slough outside of Black Oak. And Dad just hired on. He got a job. He was desperate. And as it turned out, he got hired by a very good company, a big construction company. And because he would work 7 days a week, they really liked him. And so we started moving. And our first, almost every other summer, our first move was to Crenshaw, Mississippi, then to Delhi, Louisiana. And we came back to Parkin, Arkansas for 3 years, 3 of the happiest years of a very happy childhood. And we hated to leave Parkin. It was a wonderful little town back then. And, everything revolved around the high school football team. We worshiped at the First Baptist Church. My best friend was the son of the Methodist minister. They were just down the street. And I was baptized in the First Baptist Church in Parkin, Arkansas when I was 8 years old. And then we left there and moved a couple more times and finally settled just outside of Memphis in South Haven, Mississippi. It's a suburb of Memphis, but it's in Mississippi. And it was, our lives improved dramatically when we moved there because we had a home for the first time that we owned, and we had better schools and better teachers. And my mother started this desire for our kids to go to college. And so that was, and they worked hard, they were frugal, they saved their money, and they were determined for us to go to college. So I had great parents. And every year, several times a year, I'd hear my parents say, "We're going home this weekend, we're going home." Home was Monette, Black Oak, like I said, and then we're going home to see the grandparents, the aunts and uncles. That was a common thing. We're going home. Where's Dad? He went home. It was always going home. Home was the farmland. And for us, it was not, so the trips were fun, I guess, but for my parents, it was pretty tough on them because the farm brought back a lot of really bad memories of hard times. And so, but we stayed close to our families. And as I said, went to all their funerals. And I think I'm down to one aunt. Sammy Pate is in Monette, Arkansas. She's my mom's youngest sister. Okay. All the rest of them passed on. So we still have a few kinfolks around.
Okay. Well, do you get back to Arkansas much or?
Not since my parents died. But again, Dad died January of 2017, and we were back a lot. Their final few years, we were there as much as we could be there. And he stopped fishing about 15 years ago. And so that, that was something we enjoyed doing together. We have not been back to Monette to see my aunt in many years. So not very often. One of my best friends is Mark Lee, who is in Little Rock. And he's the reason I'm here now, because Mark asked me to take a look at your invitation, your very kind invitation. I said, sure. Mark and I go way back to Ole Miss together. Okay. And he's been in Little Rock for many years, and try to see him occasionally, but no, not very often.
Okay. I should probably add my thanks to Mark Lee as well for him helping us secure this time. So, well, the paint a house is a lot of what that childhood, and it's very different than so many of your books. Was the experience in writing that different for you than kind of your other books?
Sure. It was a wonderful experience, because over the years, my father was a pretty good storyteller, and my grandfather was a pretty good storyteller. And I can vividly recall sitting on the front porch at night in the summertime when it's very hot in the cotton patch, while my mom and grandmother shelled peas and butter beans. The men would sit and rest. They'd been in the fields all day and listen to the St. Louis Cardinals. That was every night. The radio was our connection to the outside world. And we lived and died with the St. Louis Cardinals. And so I heard all these stories over the years, some of these really great stories. And about 20 years ago, I decided to try to put them all together in a novel. There's a lot of truth in the book, but it's a highly fictionalized childhood memoir. And I wanted to do it while my parents were still alive, and I could use them as resources. And it turned into just a great time together. I would call them all the time. And I remember one phone call, called my parents, I said, who had the first telephone in Black Oak? Who had the first television? When did you first see your first televised baseball game? Who owned the TV set? And they would argue about it for 2 or 3 days and call me back. But it was stuff like that they were able to relive, and it all worked its way into the novel. The setting was very accurate. The setting was the cotton patch, the making the crop in the fall. The workers from the hills, they came and pitched their tents in the front yard. And in the backyard, the barn, we had the Mexican farm labor. They came every year. And the first time I ever threw a baseball, it was not with my dad. It was with a Mexican named Juan. We had the same name. We thought it was really cool because we had the same name.
Uh-huh.
He taught me how to throw a baseball, and because he loved the game too. So a lot of great memories, but also a lot of collected stories that I was able to put together. And it's one of my favorite books. I've always loved A Painted House. And the title was rarely do I have the title when I start writing a book. I'm not good with titles, but my mom used to tell this funny story about at school one day when she was a little girl. She was a town girl. She lived in downtown Black Oak proper, or Monette, both towns, whereas my dad was from the farm, and there was a big difference. And so these two girls, mom and this other little girl, were arguing about something, and mom lived in town, and the little girl lived in the countryside. She was a farmer. And the little girls, they were getting smart with each other, and the little girl, she said, "Oh yeah, but you live in a painted house." That was a big step up from where they lived, because their house was not painted. And so mom always thought that was funny. People thought they had more because their house was painted. And that was for the title. I heard that title when I was 10 years old.
Wow. Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, obviously education was important to your parents, because I think that they joined the library and the church when they moved everywhere. And so tell us about education and how, did you enjoy school going through, and then kind of maybe move into what moved you, inspired you to go to law school, including some of those early jobs you might have had. Some of them are pretty interesting.
Wow, we were expected to work. We moved a lot. I think I mentioned most of the towns we moved to, and the first thing we did was join the local, Baptist church, and we were there every Sunday, scrubbed and starched and, in our best. My mother, we didn't have any money, but mom always said, anybody can afford soap. And she had no use for uncleanliness. So we were always clean, always well fed. We would also go to the library, and my brother and sister, by the end we had a fourth child who was much younger, my youngest brother. We could automatically gauge the quality of life in any small town by two things: the library and how many books you could check out each visit.
Mm-hmm.
And it ranged from 2 books to 5 books. But we were very judgmental about, which libraries wouldn't give you many books. And also the quality of the Little League baseball park. my brother and I would take off and go find a ballpark, wherever it was in town, and scope it out and get out and walk around and see if they took care of it. And was the backstop ragged? Did it have holes in it? You know, we could tell what kind of town it was by the library and the Little League baseball field. And so we grew up with just stacks of books all over the house, library books. We would pass the books around. My mom would, she didn't have to make us read. We just grew up reading. She wanted us to read. She didn't like television. She did not like television at all, even back then. She thought it was going to be evil. And we didn't watch much TV as kids. We also, being Baptists, we were in church almost 7 days a week, so we didn't have time to watch television. We moved around. We joined the various churches. We finally settled down though in South Haven, and as I said, got in better schools and better teachers. And the college talk started. We were all going to college. And, they were going to make sure that we did that. And about halfway through college, our home was a very strict Southern Baptist upbringing, where everything was illegal, immoral. You couldn't do anything. Okay, that's my mother. She was a Puritan, and so we couldn't wait to get away from home and go to college, to get out from under their thumbs and go and not break bad, but go just do what college kids do. And so my first 2 years in college, there was a lot of partying. There was a lot of fun. I never got in trouble, but there was I wasn't studying much. And after 2 years of college, I mean, my grades were not too impressive, and Mom and Dad weren't watching us real close. They really didn't know what to watch for. They just knew we were in college. And, I was 20 years old. It's one of those moments where it takes longer for boys to, for the light to go off and you finally realize what you're doing. I was 20. And I said, I can't keep doing this. I've got to, I had this chance to go to college. And I was influenced by a good friend, the guy I met at Mississippi State, and he was going to law school. And he said, this is the route you need to go. Get a degree in accounting, which is a very tough degree. You can still do it. Your college career is not over. You can clean this up a little bit and go to law school. And for some reason, that just stuck. I'd never thought about law school before, and that became my focus. And that's what I did. And I finished law school 40 years ago. Renee and I were married one week, May of '81, and I finished law school the following week, and went back to my hometown, and didn't want to work for any of the law firms there. Didn't really have a lot of job offers. I tell people, even though you've read the firm, don't get the idea I was heavily recruited out of law school, because I was not. There were no jobs, and I just hung out my shingle and on Main Street in South Haven. And of course, I'd grown up there. I knew a lot of people, and almost starved to death. And a funny story, that's how Mark Lee entered the picture. Mark had just finished Ole Miss as an undergrad with a degree in business. And he was working for a brokerage firm in Memphis. And I'm not sure Mark had gotten married by then. Anyway, he stopped by my office one day, knocking on doors, and he was trying to put together a seminar on investments and estate taxes and things like that. And I didn't have any clients. He didn't have any clients. And so we drank coffee for 2 hours and shot the bull and became friends. And over the years, if I had if I got a decent settlement or a client had a little money, I'd call Mark, and Mark would come in and help the person with their finances. And we got to be close friends. And it was very the stroke of good luck, because later, after the law career, once the book started selling, I had somebody I really trusted in my corner, and it's always been Mark. And so that's how I met Mark. It didn't take me too long though with the legal career to realize it was not going to go anywhere. It was making a lot of money in a small town law practice is very hard to do, and I was very much like Jake Bergantz in A Time to Kill, in A Time for Mercy. I was that young, idealistic, hardworking lawyer in a small town, dreaming of the big case, dreaming of the big courtroom drama, dreaming of somehow, doing better, succeeding as a lawyer. And so when I started writing that book, it was a lot of autobiography in A Time to Kill. That was kind of the way we lived. Had a beautiful young wife who's having babies, and life was pretty complicated, and I was not too happy with the legal career. And I never dreamed of writing. I was not a child. I was a big reader as a kid, but I never thought about writing. I didn't study creative writing in college. It came later in life when I was 30 years old, and I had this story that I thought was very compulsive and entertaining, and so I just started writing it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it sounds like Jake has certainly been part of your character throughout some of these the books you've written. I've got a few questions that are coming in really about your writing, but I want to stay just real quickly on kind of, you talked a lot about your going to Baptist churches, being members. I think that you're not Baptist now, but I was struck by in A Time for Mercy, there was a conversation that Jake at the end of the book, and that Jake and Portia were having about the death penalty. And you actually Jake starts talking more in general about faith and why he changed his mind, because it's part of growing up, of living and maturing. And then he went on and said, most Christians he knows do a good job at cherry picking their way through the New Testament. So I'm curious how your faith has kind of grown and developed. I feel like in that book, you talk more about the church in some ways. So,
yeah, personally, I mean, we left the Southern Baptist Convention 30 years ago just over politics. I just really got tired of the politics, and it was drifting further and further to the right. And they were also purging seminaries and even individual churches once the fundamentalists took over. And we lost a pastor, a friend who was just run out by the fundamentalists, and that was happening with foreign missionaries. It was happening. We just said this is not the kind of church we want to be affiliated with. We're now members of a Presbyterian church, country church close to where we live in Central Virginia, and just around the corner. And we really enjoy the worship. As far as how the faith affects the writing. When I started writing, again, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know if I was going to write one book, two books, or now it's 45. I sure didn't think about writing 45 books. But it was very simple. I said, okay, my faith is going to put some boundaries here about as to what I'm willing to write. I've always been a voracious reader, and I know the good stuff and the bad stuff, and I know, what sells and what doesn't. I'm not going to compromise with my storytelling with a lot of gratuitous sex and violence and language. And that's what a lot of popular fiction is, popular movies, popular television. I'm just not going to do that. And I've joked about this, but I was dead serious. I said, I'm not going to write a book that my mother cannot read. And I said, okay, I did that. I've never been pushed to do anything different. In an interesting story, this happened, the firm came out 30 years ago now, March 1 of 1981. Monday is March 1st. It's 30 years ago when the firm was published. And it fortunately became a bestseller real fast. And people realize that they stay up all night reading the book, the pages are turning, they're calling in sick for work, whatever, skipping lunch. That's what I love about writing suspense. And so you take people away for a couple of days. But they finished the book, and then they realized they could give it to their 15-year-old kid or their 80-year-old mother and not worry about it. Mm-hmm. And for that reason, that was one reason the book sold very well. It was the first big novel in a long time of popular fiction that did not have all the other stuff in it. So the books are clean. Mm-hmm. And so that was part of the success of the firm. And once the firm was established, no one would dare suggest that I, try anything else. And so no one has ever done that. They did right before the firm came out, right before it was finished. And I didn't listen to them. So, the faith has had a big role in And what I write, how I write, there are certain characters. You can't write popular fiction and preach all the time. You have to be more subtle. You do it through your characters. You do it through individual, like Jake. He's talking about how he became a death penalty proponent to an opponent of the death penalty. Same
Right.
thing happened to me. It was just a moment when I said, this is not right. And so Jake had that moment. And through some of it, there's a scene in Sycamore Road where two young boys are killed by a drunk driver. And their father meets the daughter of the drunk driver. And he says, and she was terrified. And he says, I just want you to know that we forgive you. When we bury our two boys tomorrow, I don't want any hard feelings. I don't want them to go away with this hanging over them. I want you to tell your father that we forgive him for what he did. Well, I'm not sure I could do that, but and so you can tell little stories like that through your characters without staying in the pulpit all day. So you have to be careful. When it comes to popular fiction, you can't assume your readers share your religion, your faith, or your politics. So you got to be careful.
Yeah. Well, you certainly are diverse. You often mention all the major main lines somehow make it in your books. I especially like it when the Methodist Church is making it in there in a positive way. So appreciate that.
I killed the preacher in the Reckoning. I killed the Methodist preacher in the first chapter of the Reckoning. He gets.
Oh, I forgot that. Yeah,
forgot that one. He got shot
yes,
in the head. That's the whole story. So I've got. I've gotten most of the ministers over the years. I like the one in the Time for Mercy because it's non-denominational. It's a very open-minded little country church with a minister who becomes a very likable character. So I've always got preachers somewhere close.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. That's good. So you've talked a lot about that you like to read. A question came in, what authors have inspired you? And they went on to say, any inspiration from C.S. Lewis? But who's inspired you kind of along the way?
The first one who comes to mind would be John Steinbeck, because I had a great high school English teacher. Francis McGuffey taught me when I was a senior in high school, and I was a jock. I was a football player, basketball player, baseball player. I didn't have time for, serious books. And she saw something that I, didn't want anybody to see. I had an interest in literature because I'd always been a big reader. And so she made us read a book called Tortilla Flat, written by John Steinbeck. Well, growing up in Mississippi, I think it's a state law that every kid has to have Faulkner crammed down your mouth from the time you're 15 through 18. And every high school English teacher in Mississippi thinks she can teach Faulkner. And Faulkner cannot be taught, I don't think. So we had Faulkner going on one hand, and Miss McGuffey had mercy on us and let us read something that we could understand, which was Steinbeck. And I read Tortilla Flat, and I waited till after class one day, and I said, Miss McGuffey, I really enjoyed this book, Tortilla Flat. She said, oh, really? She said, try this one. And so she gave me another one. I think it was Cannery Row, and then of Mice and Men. And, she walked me through all of John Steinbeck. Oh. And she saved the best for last, and that was The Grapes of Wrath. And when I read The Grapes of Wrath, I thought, this is great literature. And I'm just having inspiration. I remember I was not inspired to write, but I do remember thinking at the time, I wish I could write this clearly. I wish I could write this clearly. I try to write now. I want the reader to know what's going on. I don't want the reader to be in the dark. So I try to write clearly. So Steinbeck was an influence. Once I started writing, it's actually a funny story. As I was writing my first novel, I started reading everything on the bestseller list. Every big name you could think of 35 years ago. And I thought, I would finish the book and I would say, that guy right there is real good. I'll never be that good. And I would say, this book is terrible. This is a terrible writer. And I was being honest, but I realized there was room for me in there somewhere. I could outwrite most of them, but not all of them. And so it was the bad books that actually inspired me to keep going, because I knew the bad fiction kept me going because I knew I could top that. And so, and when you're writing your first book, you need a lot of inspiration. You play a lot of mind games with yourself to get the book finished. John le Carre, who died a month ago, the British guy, was a huge influence on me. About 30 years ago, I read a book called Little Drummer Girl, one of his better known books. It's about the setting is the Palestinian-Israeli conflict in the mid-1970s. And it's just really smart. He's a great writer. Smart fiction, clever fiction, well-researched. And I still tell myself, you need to keep trying to be as good as he is. And every time I start a book, every year, I have the same goal of being, writing the best book so far.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, questions come in, and I was curious, how much research time are you putting into these books? I mean, if you're from the towns where you're writing those books, you know the restaurants that you've mentioned. I mean, you've been there. So how much are you spending on all that?
It varies. A book like Time for Mercy is set in Ford County. It's the third book with Jake as our protagonist, but it's actually the fourth or fifth book from Ford County, and that's a very fictional place. It's kind of like Oxford, Mississippi, with the town I know, the towns I know, and that's where we're from. That's what you understand.
Right.
From the Deep South, it's the religion, the customs, the culture, the food, the politics, the history. That doesn't take much research. A book like The Broker, I was traveling a lot in Italy back then because it's fun, but also doing book stuff. The Europeans are big readers, but they expect to see you over there. They like American popular fiction, but you better go over there and promote because they want to see you, especially the French and the Italians. And so I was in Italy and I'd seen most of the country, and I wanted to set a book. The Broker could be set anywhere in the world. The beginning could. And so I picked the town of Bologna, the city of Bologna. I'd never been there, and set the book there. And so I had to go there several times to do research. That's the fun part. I've been to death row in like 6 states researching, and
Okay.
Not Arkansas, but Texas, Oklahoma, other states. That's fascinating research. It's depressing, but it's gotta be. I've been to a lot of federal prisons and jails, places like that. Several of the books are set in Washington. I'm 2 hours by car from downtown Washington right here, and easy drive. So I go there all the time. I really enjoy Washington and Georgetown and those areas. And so it's fun. You can always set a book in Washington. The Guardians came out a year and a half ago, and I'd never been to Savannah. Savannah was on my list of towns. I've got a long list of places in this country I haven't been to, and places I want to see and maybe put a book there. Almost everywhere I go, eventually is going to end up in a book, because that's just the way it happens. So I set the main character's office. He's an Episcopal priest who becomes a prison activist, innocence activist, and because of his inspiration at church. And I set the office in Savannah, so I would have to go there and learn the city. So that's kind of the fun part. Camino Island, there are 2 Camino Island books. Camino Island and Camino Winds came out last year.
Right.
It's a series. There'll probably be 1 more, maybe 2, but that's where we vacation. Amelia Island in Florida, north of Jacksonville, is our favorite vacation spot. So I thought it was fun to kind of fictionalize our place down there and use that as a backdrop for a couple of books. So you never can tell. I mean, I wrote a scene yesterday that took place in Arkansas. It's not a big scene, but I needed a good place for a scene, and I picked Arkansas. The day before I think it was Louisiana. So obviously they're moving around a lot. Okay. You never know. You never know where an idea is going to come from, a place. And with the internet now, the research is so easy. You used to back in the dark ages, I had thousands of travel books, and if I was writing about a hotel scene in London, I would have to look that up and make sure I got it right, the streets right, all this kind of stuff, and which is not heavy lifting. Now you go to Google, punch it in, and there you are. So the internet's made it so much easier for me to research and to find information.
Well, you certainly captured the details. So several questions you've kind of talked about. Several questions come in about how difficult was it and your research behind The Innocent Man. Talk a little bit about that particular book. People are interested, I think, in hearing some.
It's been a fascinating journey that is still not over. It happened. I had never thought about writing nonfiction. I had never, even as a small town criminal defense lawyer, I never had a client I thought was wrongfully convicted. We had good judges, we had good prosecutors, we had good police officers. Everybody played it straight. It was a good system. I was never aware of wrongful convictions and things like that. And early in December of 2004, I was flipping through the New York Times one morning early, and I saw this obituary for a guy named Ron Williamson, who was from a small town in Oklahoma. And the lead, it was the lead obituary that day. I love obituaries, especially New York Times obituaries. I get a lot of ideas there. But there was a picture of Ron in court with a badly fitting suit and coat and tie, and looking confused. And the headline said, "Ron Williamson, freed from death row, dies at the age of 53." Mm-hmm. And the obituary was just, it just stopped me cold. This guy was the first round draft pick of the Oakland A's in 1972. From his little corner of Oklahoma, they thought he was the next Mickey Mantle. And he did too. He was a very cocky, great athlete, kind of a hellraiser guy, but fun to be, life of the party, but a tremendous athlete. And he thought he was the next Mickey Mantle. And he went off, he signed with the A's and lost all his money in a card game and hit the minor leagues and picked up some bad habits and injuries, and it didn't work out. And he went back to his hometown and he got framed for a murder that he had nothing to do with. And the town turned on him. And everybody involved was white. There was no racial angle to it. Everybody, all the jurors were all white. Cops, prosecutors, victims, everything, so there was not the racial angle that we see so often. And Ron was wrongfully convicted, went off to death row, and in 1992, after he'd been there for 4 or 5 years, he got his death notice, and they took him to the warden's office and said, "Okay, next Friday you're going to be executed." They have a checklist of things you have to go through. And he was mentally ill. He lost 100 pounds, and he was in bad shape, mentally and physically. And one question was, "What do you want us to do with your body?" And he said, "Never thought about that. I don't care. Yeah, send me to my sister," is what he said. "Send me to my sister." And a very, very brave, smart federal judge, Judge Frank C. in Oklahoma, stopped the execution at the last minute. With 5 days to go, they stopped the execution. And it was just a great story. And I took off to Oklahoma to write this story, and had no idea what I was doing. I'm not a journalist. I'm not trained in journalism. I was just flailing away. And but every day was a new adventure. Every day was a new story. Every day was this fascinating world of wrongful convictions. And I realized there are tens of thousands of innocent people in prison. And once most white people don't believe that. Black people do because they've lived it. But most white people still don't believe that.
Right.
And once you buy into it, once you see the numbers, once you talk to them, to the incarcerated, the wrongfully incarcerated, it's really hard to let it go. I'll cut to the end of the story. That was in 2004, 2005. The book came out in 2006. In this town of Ada, there were 6 wrongful convictions in a 5-year period in the mid 1980s. And the other 5 are out. Tommy Ward is still in prison. And I wrote a letter to his parole board yesterday.
Oh.
Tommy and I are pen pals.
Uh-huh.
I've been writing him for 15 years, and we're still trying to get him out and still fighting away. So the story is not over yet.
Yeah. Wow. Well, and again, it continues to come out in themes in your books. This whole issue, very, very issue. So, a few other questions, and one that I even have: how do you strike your balance of? I mean, are you still, you're involved in baseball and community things, but that balance of kind of recharging yourself, finding what you need to get that imagination going for a new book, and family time and all that.
Well, I'm not joking when I say I have not worked 40 hours a week in the last 30 years. I usually write every morning, 5 days a week, sometimes 6. From around 7 to around 11. I did it this morning. I really enjoy that time. My office is on the farm about 10 miles south of here, and I love to go to my office at 7 o'clock in the morning with nothing but a strong cup of coffee, no phone, no fax, no internet, no music, no nothing. It's a kind of a little dark, cramped place, and it's me and this huge screen and the typewriter, computer, and that's still, even after 45 books, is still a lot of fun. And I mean, I have nothing else to do to fill that time each day. If I didn't write, I don't know what I would do. Because of COVID, I wrote more words last year than any other year in my career because I was stuck at home, still am. But I published 2 books and both of them were too long. But I enjoy doing that. I enjoy finding the stories. I enjoy stalking the story, watching a trial, watching a law firm explode, watching, it's going to be fun watching the COVID litigation. Okay, the lawsuits are already being filed. People are suing nursing homes. People are suing insurance companies because they will not pay for the work stoppage coverage. I mean, I have a friend, a businessman, who had that policy, and the policy mentioned pandemics. And the insurance company said, no, we're not paying anybody. Well, big lawsuit. But the litigation is going to be fascinating to watch. That's where I live. Yeah. I mean, that's my world. I love the issues dealing with wrongful convictions, obviously, but also mass incarceration. All the injustices that we see playing out now in the streets are caused by bad laws and bad policies that we have had for years. And I like to explore those. Death penalty, I've probably written about that enough. Virginia just abolished it last week or 2 weeks ago. So, some of these issues are still playing out. I just read the newspaper. I just mm-hmm. watch the news mm-hmm. and the stories, fall in my lap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you've already alluded. So are there some themes already going around in your head from the pandemic and from kind of where our society is that you see coming out in the next several books?
Yeah, I can't see writing about the pandemic. I'm not much when it comes to science and medicine and math and stuff like that. I'd rather stay where I am. And there's going to be so many plague novels choking the marketplace in the years to come, because writers are stuck at home or people who want to write are stuck at home they can't do anything, so they're writing a book. Publishers are getting flooded with manuscripts. It started 6 months ago. They're kind of laughing about it here and in the UK. I talked to my British publisher last week, and they're just getting flooded with manuscripts because people are stuck at home writing books. There's going to be a lot of pandemic novels. I can't see writing about a plague or something like that. Certainly the legal issues could be a very rich area for great stories. And so, and the other issues that we see are playing out now, the mass incarceration, the unfairness of so many of our laws, the legalization of marijuana, legalization of decriminalization of drugs. That's before 2016. We were seeing some progress in the area of criminal justice reform, because you got the Democrats on the left who push reform because of human rights and fairness and all that, and a lot of Republicans believe that too. Okay, on the right, you got the Republicans who are tired of paying for 2.3 million people in prison. And the prison budgets are about to bankrupt a bunch of our states. There's so many people in prison needlessly, nonviolent people who should be given another chance. So the two sides were coming together before 2016, and the last administration had no interest whatsoever in it. And frankly, when Jeff Sessions became the Attorney General, all of it went out the window. He had no interest in criminal justice reform. We're optimistic now. Both sides are optimistic now that we can meet back in the middle and maybe see some meaningful criminal justice reform, which will take care of, or potentially take care of, a lot of the problems we're seeing in the system today. So again, that's where I live. That's what fascinates me. That's where I try to help in small ways. But the stories are endless. So I'm just, again, they fall in my lap.
You certainly found your passion, your vocation that's come out of those early law school thinking. And well, I want to switch. We're down to less than 15 minutes. As a foundation, I think a lot about foundation and philanthropy, and so I want to talk just a little bit about your philanthropy. You have certainly found causes that you have been passionate about. I'm looking at some notes here. The Coast Fund certainly put some of your passion and money into baseball. We've talked about the Innocent Project. You were behind helping get the Confederate flag from the Mississippi state flag. So what is it that drives you to get involved, that you're going to put not just your time and your money, but your name? I mean, your name carries a lot. So what's your passions behind getting your philanthropy work?
A lot of it goes back to the belief that Renee and I have, in that we never dreamed we would be here. We never dreamed we would be in this position in life. Again, we were very happy before I started writing books. I'm not sure how long I would have been a lawyer. I probably would have become a judge, something with a steady paycheck. But we feel very blessed. Her parents are still alive. Mine are deceased, but our parents are very generous. They taught us to be generous. And we support a lot of local charities and national organizations. The Innocence Project is the one I've been on the board now for 15 years, visibly attached to that, and have no plans to leave. About 3 years ago, Renee got really involved with No Kid Hungry, and the issue of childhood hunger has taken front and center in our lives. She's on the board of No Kid Hungry, the national board. We are raising money for No Kid Hungry, or just the issue of childhood hunger. It came home, it hit hard 10 years ago when our daughter had her first classroom as a kindergarten teacher. And we went down and helped her put her classroom together down in Raleigh. And she was very excited to be teaching, because she had her master's degree, and that's all she ever wanted to do was teach. And so we were very proud of her, and again, helped her set up her classroom. And so she got her kids, and there were 25 kids, I think, in one class. And she called home about the second or third day at night, called home, and she was distraught. She was emotional. She said that she realized that a couple of her kids had come to school that morning hungry, with no breakfast. Most of them would get free lunches, but no breakfast. And they did not want to admit that they were hungry. And so she was stunned by the fact that, in a nice area of Raleigh, North Carolina, there were hungry it was the first time Renee and I had ever thought about childhood hunger. But once you start getting into it and you realize how many kids in this country are hungry at night or at school, it's astonishing. Before COVID, we had nationwide, we had the number at about 1 out of 7 kids faced hunger issues. That doesn't mean they're hungry every day. What it means is they're not sure where the next meal is coming from. Okay, that was 1 in 7. In the past year, it has shot up to 1 in 4. 1 in 4 kids nationwide has hunger issues because the schools are closed. The kids are not getting to school. And we heard all these horrible stories as we were getting into the No Kid Hungry of schools. For a lot of kids in the South, the dirtiest word they can hear is snow. We were joking about it earlier. The threat of snow is something we live for in the South because we never get it, or rarely get it. But for a kid who eats at school, the fact that snow is coming, it's means they're going to go hungry. And you hear these stories, and we finally heard enough. We said, okay, we're believers now. Okay, what can we do? And so we jumped into that, both feet, and writing a lot of checks and raising a lot of money and raising awareness for childhood hunger. That issue is going to be around. The great thing, but the good thing about that issue, it is a problem that can be solved in this country because we produce enough food to feed everybody. There's plenty of food in this country. What No Kid Hungry does is a lot of school districts don't know how to get the food. They don't know. There's too much trouble. There's too much bureaucracy. There's too much, all this kind of stuff. No Kid Hungry goes in and shows a school district, this is how you get the food. This is how you get the food for the weekend, your snack packs to take home, summertime food. It's all about food. There's plenty of food. And there's always going to be plenty of food in this country. We're lucky. But getting it to the kids is often almost impossible. So that's what that's our current, we do, Wayne, I don't like to brag about what we do. I don't like to talk about some things. We take a visible position. Like Innocence Project is the one. My Little League baseball park, I built it 25 years ago. I don't know why I built it, but I still got it. Nobody else wants it, and I can't give it away. The county won't take it, so I'm stuck with it. And when you own a Little League baseball park, you can be the commissioner because you own it. So I'm the full-time, long-time, permanent Little League commissioner at Cove Creek Park. And it's my ballpark. Again, it's a wonderful place. We have about 500 kids every year, and that used to be visible around here. Now it's 25 years old. Nobody cares anymore but the kids. And so we pick and choose our battles. We realized years ago, I don't care how much money you make, you can't save the world. And so you got to pick little small battles who try to have some impact here and there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you've certainly found the joys of being benevolent. Some of that may come from growing up, in the church all your life. And some people might say, well, you've got the means to give away, but I think we all can give away either time or resources, no matter where we are. What would you say to someone, especially someone who is, has name recognition like you, has the financial resources, but they don't understand the joy or why you should give anything away? It's all collect, earn as much as I can. How would you help somebody with that? Or what would you say to them?
I don't know how you help people like that, to be honest. I don't know how you show people the joy of giving until you can convince them to give. Once they actually do it, and that's not really my role. I don't think I have a role, but sometimes I say, well, maybe if I do this in a more public way, it might inspire somebody else to do it. And not because I want the headline or the attention, but maybe if I just do this one project or step forward with a gift or step forward with a speech or some leadership role, there may be others who might be inspired by that. So that's very much what Renee and I talk about this all the time. We talk about it all the time. Our kids are gone now. We've raised our kids, two wonderful kids. And so it's just the two of us. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about, I'm 66. I have my Medicare card now, but for a year. So I'm proud of that. We're not getting younger. And so we look at the future and we say, okay, what's going to happen? What's going to happen with our estates? What's going to happen with the money? Where do we want the money to go? So it's something we talk about all the time, so we're always looking for ways to help people.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you leading by example and helping others do that. So we really do just have a few more minutes. Anything you'd like that I didn't, I know there's a lot, I got a lot of questions and people are going to say, why didn't you ask my question? But any kind of closing things that you didn't say that you'd like to share with this Arkansas, your hometown?
I don't know. You covered it all pretty thoroughly. Trying to think back of some memories. This is what one thing that comes to mind as I write. These small towns I lived in, Parkin and Black Oak and Delhi, Louisiana, Ripley, Mississippi, Crenshaw, Mississippi. All these towns. This was in the 1950s and 1960s. These were all white towns. Our world was all white. Everything we did, the community, the church, the school, especially, our friends, everything was all white. Yet the town was half black, all of them. There was the other side of the tracks, literally in Park, and there were the other side of the tracks where the black folks lived. And we knew it was there, but we were so segregated in everything that we did. Looking back now, it's really hard to imagine how. And when I write about Clanton and Ford County in a fictional setting, there are a lot of black characters in those novels because Jake has a lot of black clients. But I often think about those towns and what it was like, what it must have been like for them to live on their side of the tracks and to see our world, which always looked much better. We were so oblivious to that, and I don't know if it's improved that much. Most of those towns have dried up. That's something I think about especially Parkin. I went back to Parkin about 5 years ago. I flew into Memphis, and I was going to see my folks in Mountain View. So it's about a 3-hour drive, and so I had plenty of time, and I rented a car. And I drove through the Marion. We played Marion in football. We played Earl. We played Crawfordsville. We played Mark Tree. Wynn was the big game because Wynn was a county seat. Wynn's still a pretty active town now. But I went back to Parkin and drove around. Again, we have nothing but great childhood memories from Parkin. But the town is, Main Street's boarded up. I couldn't find a place to stop and get a cup of coffee. In the park, and it's just they lost their school. The school closed.
Yeah.
And I went to the football field where we went. The whole town turned out every Friday night to watch the Parkin Tigers play when they were at home, and the bleachers are still there. And it was, but the field is crumbled and goalposts are torn down. And I also thought about there was a black school just on the other side of the tracks, and they had a football team, and their school was worse off than ours. So a lot of memories, most of them good, I guess, but it was just a different world back then.
Yeah, that's right. Well, John, it's fun. You actually ended almost the way we began with Arkansas. But again, we are so grateful for you and your time, especially your time and your inspiration.
Thoroughly enjoyed it. Happy to be here.
Well, glad you're here. I'll just give our next kind of speaker next month is already available. Janet Carson, who's a master gardener. We also have Chelsea Clinton lined up, Craig O'Neill, Reverend Renita Rasmus, who's written a book on depression. She's in Houston. Our Bishop Gary Muller will be upcoming folks. If you get on the Methodist Foundation, AR website, you can look at our upcoming speakers. And again, I thank the audience for being here. And John, we thank you again and hope you have a good rest of the day.
Thank you. My
Thank
pleasure.
you.
See you guys. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.